Ricky Seppo was singing lead, playing bass. The following year, we performed, and we did a dance too. We did a dance. It was the first time I had a date to go to a dance. That ended horribly. It ended horribly. Shout out to Angela Benewall. And then we did the talent show. And one of the topics that we're going to cover here, Justin, is Whitesnake.
Sure.
So Whitesnake became like one of the biggest bands on the planet during this time. So of course we did Here I Go Again. And one of the things that I always talk about, and I told you this. I told you this the other night. So Justin and I talked briefly right around the time that the podcast dropped, and all these years later, I am 40, almost 48 years old, and I'm still embarrassed by the fact that I couldn't hit that killer note in Here I Go Again, which is actually sung by David Coverdale, one of like the greatest rock vocalists ever, who he himself could rarely hit that note consistently. And I'm like, oh man, I missed that note. And it's like, dude, David Coverdale can't do it. He couldn't do it then, hardly. And of course, all those live musicians, they have backing tracks that make it a whole heck of a lot easier to do their stuff. So Whitesnake ended up being my first concert. Now, it wasn't supposed to be my first concert. My first concert was supposed to be the Jay Giles Band in New Haven. And I was super psyched. They were all over the radio. This is, centerfold time period. And it never happened because my dad was banking on scalpers and a buddy of his who said, hey, we'll just go ahead and we'll get some tickets. It was Jay Giles. They're already an East Coast band. There was no way you were going to get a ticket that night. So I never got to see the Jay Giles Band live, which is kind of a bummer. So what was your first concert?
My first concert was Tower of Power when I was about 8 years old. It was at Wesleyan. I don't remember it. I remember being there, but I don't really remember the actual. I don't think I really cared about the music. I was more the bass player, Tower of Power's son, and I were playing in the sand pits. I don't know, out in the field. And my father tells me that story now. He's like, "Oh yeah, you were hanging out with Rocco Presti as kid," and I'm like, "I was." But that was the first concert. But my first concert I really went for the sake of music was Journey with Steve Perry.
Wow.
And that was with Glass Tiger opening up.
Oh, no kidding. What a bill.
Yeah. Oh, it was great. It was wonderful. It was right on the Raised on Radio tour. Unfortunately, it didn't have two of the band members. I mean, it had Randy Jackson and Mike Baird rather than Steve Smith and Ross Valerie. But for the most part, they played all their hits. And I do remember this very clearly because the light show, it was some kind of first of all, Neil Schoen had his custom guitar that he played. I don't think he plays them anymore, but he had this really crazy custom guitar. It looked like a Fender, but just, weird cutaway on it. But the light show, I remember, because I was kind of parallel with the lights. And I remember that I was drawn to that. I thought that was super cool. Never seen anything like that. It was all like, we're on the cusp of this really cool innovation with the digital lights. They would come down. If you ever see the I'll Be All Right Without You video from Journey, they actually focus on these lights. And for some reason, me being a 10-year-old kid, I remember seeing that. And that just, any way you want, that's all that nice. Don't Stop Believing. That was all good. But the lights is something that it's ingrained in my head today about that concert.
Well, they were massive. So, they had the huge show, the huge performance. And what's curious about that is really within a couple of years, Steve Perry stage fright and stopped performing. So when you saw him, he was just in full voice.
It was the end. Yeah, it was the end. And you know what? And I remember seeing the yearbook. I have their tour book, and you could see it's like these really big pages of Steve Perry. Big, each member had their big centerfold on each of the guys, and the two other guys not as big of a centerfold. So you knew something was on the up where it was starting to disband. You can see the writing was on the wall with the tour book alone.
Oh, interesting.
They did sound great. Yeah, they did sound great.
That's really cool. That's a heck of a first concert. For anyone who doesn't know, what's also kind of curious about Journey, and this is more just like factoids as they pop into my head, is the fact that Neil Schon cut his teeth with Santana. I mean, that's just
No,
such an interesting thing. Because then he really, as his career progressed, started getting into heavier and heavier music, and then kind of reverting back into, kind of, that sweet spot with Journey and obviously Arnell, just phenomenal. So, I mean, really the band now is what? Just Jonathan Cain, Neil Schon, and Arnell, right?
Well, no, Dean Castronovo is the drummer. He's been with them, for the most part since 2006 or whatever. But he left a while. He got in a little trouble. Came back, but he sings like a bird. And they got this new guy. I don't know if you saw this. The new guy, he sings "I'll Be All Right Without You." They put that back in the set list this tour, and they got this guy that comes out and he plays keyboard. He doesn't come out in front and play guitar like Jonathan Cain does for Stone in Love. For the most part, he's in the back, but he sings lead on one song. Dean Castronovo sings Mother, Father, and then Arnell sings the rest of the set. So it's a couple new members. It sounds they're really good right now. Right
on. And I think they toured with Def Leppard a couple years ago, kind of got them back onto, I think both bands were falling into just the nostalgia territory, but playing together actually kind of reinvigorated both of them, and obviously, Def Leppard's going to go out on a stadium tour with the Motley Crue.
Well, speaking of Def Leppard, Def Leppard just came out with a new single too, and Journey came out with a new record. So I mean, right now, there's a lot of these old nostalgic bands are coming, and then Motley Crue's coming next year with that big stadium tour. So all these bands that we grew up with, that we're talking about, that you're talking about, it's almost like they have a second life. Or a third life, for that matter.
Well, yeah, because one of the things that I've mentioned the past couple of weeks is go to Spotify, go to iTunes, and it's just unbelievable the amount of, old content, for lack of a better term, that's really firmly implanted in the top of the charts on a routine basis. And a lot of the playlists that people are creating and posting their own tend to be very heavily, weighted with older music. But I mean, it's really no different. So, we're growing up in the 80s, and at this point, we're already, 20 years out from the Beatles, disbanding, So it's a really short period of time before things become classic rock. And I mean, everything that we listen to is now firmly in that territory, and it happens before you know it. So I'm trying to think about, like, what are the things that, our kids, so my kids, well, you have a range of kids. So my kids are all in their teens. So you have some in their 20s and all the way down to 9 years old. But for the, the older ones, you're looking 20 years back, and now the nostalgic bands are all those, the Blink-182s, the Fall Out Boys, those bands of the late 90s, early 2000s, the Matchbox 20s, et cetera. Those are now on the classic rock station. It's unbelievable how quickly it moves, but no one's really making rock music anymore. So that's why people have to kind of go back in time and look at it.
Well, if I could just stop for a second. So my middle son, when he was in 8th grade, he actually played Any Way You Want It in his talent show.
That's awesome.
So here we're talking about Journey, and so his love for Journey is much deeper than mine. I mean, here I'll spew all the facts and everything, and I've seen him with Steve Perry, but you can ask him anything you want to know about Neil Schon, and he'll tell you right off the bat. I mean, he'll tell you anything you want to know about Neil Schon.
Interesting. And now is that something just because he kind of stumbled upon it himself, or how did he come to it?
That's a great question. You know what? I'd have to ask my wife to get in here and answer that, because I don't know. I'm sure I had some kind of he didn't really have a lot of music background before growing up, but I don't know. He must have heard me listen to Journey somewhere down the line, and he probably loved it, and it took off for him. And it stops right there. I mean, he's a lover of music. There's no question about it. But I mean, that's really his bread and butter is Journey. I mean, he can ramble facts about Journey for a while.
That's very cool. That's very cool. So getting back to concerts now, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I am going to a couple of times throughout this, but because of your ridiculous memory, I'm just going to ask you, do you know the date of that concert that we saw, Whitesnake, with Great White at the New Haven Coliseum?
I'll say 88. I don't know the exact date, but it was 88.
It was 88. It was January 23rd, 1988 at the old New Haven Coliseum. And I will tell you, Justin, I was so excited, and then I got in there and I was kind of scared because there were a lot of, older dudes and all of a sudden we're, so how old are we? We're 13 years old.
Yeah, 13.
And there's dudes smoking joints and there's like girls doing all kinds of crazy things. And we're all looking around like, this is awesome. This is amazing. But at the same time, like initially it was kind of like, wow, this is a whole different world than I was expecting, because what you were seeing on the music videos apparently actually was happening at these concerts. And it was just such a mind blower. But what were your recollections of going to see, Whitesnake in 88?
Well, I think Whitesnake in general was just kind of a super group. I think having Vivian Campbell coming from Dio, having Tommy Aldrich coming from Ozzy, having Coverdale from Deep. I mean, you had each one of these guys were amazing in their own right. And I think when the record came out and it was a whole other slew of guys, I think it was kind of a, what are we really going to get out of this concert? Because, I'm sure they're going to play the songs, but what is Tommy Aldrich going to add to that Ainsley Dunbar riff that he played, on the record? And I think that was a big thing for me. From a drummer's point of view, I couldn't wait to hear the double bass because you couldn't really hear it. The mix wasn't the greatest on the record. So, in the outro of Still the Night. I mean, in the outro of Still the Night, I mean, he's pumping those 16th notes right across. The whole night was amazing. But to hear Tommy Aldrich do it, and then having Tommy Aldrich do a solo, that's just, he revolutionized, took from John Bonham with the hands and brought it somewhere else. I think that was the thing, the pinnacle as far as, I know it was our first concerts, but to see that live in front of us and see that, that Dio guitar player, whatever, 50 feet away from us. I mean, I think that was the big thing that I remember.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally left this out. We were on the floor. I mean, we were like the second section there. And also there was Rudy Sarzo was on bass, right? Right. Coming from Quiet Riot, but also Ozzy. So he was already a rhythm section with Tommy Aldrich, right?
Right. It's funny you should bring that up because I just heard a Vivian Campbell interview, could have been a month ago, and they were asking him what was it like to audition for Coverdale and all that. And he said, he gave Dio to the third record. So Dream Evil was the third Dio record. And he said, I'm going to give you the third record. I want to make some more money. Well, apparently Dio never gave him the extra money. So he jumped ship. After he jumped Dio, he ended up coming up with River Dogs. I don't know if you remember that. That was
vaguely.
Vivian Campbell had a band called River Dogs. And it was very short-lived. A great record, but there was like no backing, so it fell apart. And then John Colodner, the A&R guy for Geffen Records, he called up Vivian and said, or he called up David Coverdale and he said, you got to get this guy Campbell. And sight unheard, just totally did not. He just got him. He says, look, we're shooting 3 videos. They didn't even play. And Vivian was saying this. He goes, we didn't even play in a room yet. He goes, and we already cut 3 videos. He goes, we don't even know how we're going to even playing with each other, but we're booked for a 2-year tour. So, I mean, it was just kind of interesting how it all played out. And then how Vivian Vivian was gone after that tour, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he was. Yeah, Steve Vai came in right after that.
Yep. It's curious because obviously John Sykes had been playing with Coverdale before that, and it seemingly, at least the rumor and innuendo is that Coverdale was very much about mercenaries and you're paying to play, and that's all it is. It's just a business relationship, period. Now, I have to imagine that having business relationships with people like Ritchie Blackmore that are kind of known for just being all business, it's not personal. If you have chemistry, great. Otherwise, this is what you're going to sing. This is what you're getting to play. Go do it. Yeah. Which is why the bread and butter was a lot of session players. Yeah, that's interesting. And obviously, then Vivian Campbell. I think he landed on his feet with Def Leppard.
Oh, yeah.
I think he was doing okay. And the lost man in all this is, Adrian Vandenberg, who I thought was a hell of a lot of fun.
It's funny you should bring him up because when he actually got to be with Steve Vai, there was such a good relationship between Steve Vai and Adrian Vandenberg. In fact, I think it was Steve Vai just says, Adrian Vandenberg really made it. worth